In today's video, we're going to talk about using your drone as a giant slider while shooting time-lapse. There are some specific settings to getting great motion blur in your footage, but I also have a trick for adding the motion blur if you don't get it in camera, so stick around. And now for my bumper. It was too easy, wasn't it, about the bumper? This video is mostly about the DJI Mavic, the Mavic 2 Pro more specifically. I did some with the Phantom 3 Professional, and I'll touch on a few tips for that at the very end, but the majority of this video is broken down into sections of how to choose and do your flights, and then some on how to edit the images. In the description below, I have some links to the different parts of this video in case you want to skip directly to something. Okay, let's begin. So one of the most important things for aerial time lapses is to choose something cool to shoot. Try to actually have a subject or a reveal instead of just pointing the drone at something random and hoping for the best. After you have your subject picked out, be careful about flying too close to it. When doing these time lapses with a drone, wind can push you off course a little and make the footage look too jerky if you're too close. Flying in low wind or no wind is best if possible. But you can stabilize your footage in post and correct some of it. Smooth drone time lapses are going to need to be flown in an automatic mode where the drone flies itself, so you'll need to decide the best mode to use from the choices your drone has available. On the Mavic, you can choose to fly a straight line or orbit a subject or set up multiple waypoints for the drone to pass through. The last thing you need to decide is whether you're going to use photos or video for your time lapse. Let's look at some of the pros and cons of both of these. So if you're going to use photos, you'll have to choose how frequently the drone takes a picture. The shortest interval that I found available is 2 seconds. So that's one photo every 2 seconds as the drone drifts across the sky. It can create some awesome shots, and you can set up different motion blurs in camera. We'll go over that in a few minutes. Also, you can shoot in RAW, which gives you some amazing image editing power in post. But the downside is that you can't really slow the finished footage down and keep it from looking choppy. You can speed it up with no problem, but I've never really wanted to speed it up. I mean, shooting one frame every 2 seconds, that's about as fast as I'd want it to be. So the pro is great motion blur, but the con is you can't slow the footage down in the time lapse. On the Mavic, the hyperlapse mode makes the photo method pretty easy to do and get some great results. So the other way to shoot is a video. This is just shooting a regular video while the drone flies on an automatic course. The pro to this is that you have more control over the time-lapse speed. With the photos, 48 seconds of flight becomes 1 second of footage at 24 frames per second. But with video, you can make 48 seconds of flight be 24 seconds or 12 or 9 or just whatever you choose. You have enough frames for your footage to be smooth. The con to this is that you don't get too good of motion blur. The slowest I could set my shutter in video mode was 1/30th of a second, whereas in photo mode, I usually set it to 1/3 or 1/4 of a second. But I'll show you a trick in After Effects where you can fake motion blur pretty well if you use the video method. I was actually kind of surprised at how well it works. All right, let's get started with some flights, and let's take a look at photo mode first, where we have the camera take a photo every 2 seconds. We're going to cover the hyperlapse photo modes first. This is the easiest way to get some truly stunning shots. The 4 hyperlapse modes to choose from are free, where you can just freely fly, circle, where the drone orbits a selected subject, course lock, where the drone flies past a selected subject while continuing to film that subject, and waypoint, where you can pick the locations and the camera angles and the drone will just go through them. So let's start up the Mavic and set up a few things before we even select the hyperlapse flight mode. Open up the camera settings menu below the record button. Since I want to try to get some motion blur in my photos, I want to change the camera settings from automatic to manual mode. Here I can set ISO and aperture how I like, but the main thing is to set the shutter speed to about 1/4 of a second. If it won't let you set it down that low, you might be adjusting your video settings and need to swap just photo settings by choosing the swap icon above the record button. After you have the shutter set, adjust your other settings to get a good picture. And if it is daytime, you'll need some ND filters to cut how much light is going through the lens. There'll just be way too much light when you set the shutter to a 4th or a 3rd. I bought an ND filter pack made by DJI and used the ND32 on a day with full sun. This cut the light by 5 stops and made it possible for me to still shoot in full daylight with the shutter set to 1/4 of a second. If you don't have any ND filters or can't get any, you can set your camera to however you need to get good pictures, or maybe even just shoot in automatic. You won't get motion blur, but it'll still look pretty cool. Plus, I have that trick later for faking some motion blur. Now, select the camera picture icon and go to the white balance setting. I suggest setting a white balance instead of leaving it on automatic white balance or AWB. If you leave it on auto, it can be changing as the time lapse is shooting and makes the final product look kind of bad. Finally, click the gear icon. I like to turn on Save Original Hyperlapse. When your drone finishes a hyperlapse, it will automatically stitch the images together for you into a video, but you can only color grade that like you would any other video footage. If you turn on Save Original Hyperlapse and select RAW, you will have every photo saved individually, and you can edit them later in the RAW editor and really do some powerful editing. Okay, now you can select the little controller icon on the left and choose Hyperlapse. If you don't see this icon, make sure that your Mavic is set into P mode on the side of the controller and the icon should appear. The first mode available is free mode. And a lot of people say, don't use this mode, but there's one thing in free mode that I really like. It has cruise control. So if you select free mode and hit go, it will start taking photos at the interval you selected. If you're beside a straight road or a river or something, you can fly slowly and steadily to the side and get the option to turn on the cruise control. It will continue in that direction you chose at the speed you were going. I like this because you can set it to well under 1 mile an hour. And if you want, you don't have to go to the side. You can go any direction and get the cruise control option. So that's what I like about free mode. But now let's look at circle mode. Open your hyperlapse mode and choose circle. Set the settings and be sure to keep in mind if you want it to go clockwise or counterclockwise when it orbits your subject. Now aim your camera at something and on the screen drag a box around what you want the subject to be. That's what will get orbited when you hit go. It will fly for a few seconds to set up and then start taking photos. The next mode that we're looking at is course mode, where the drone flies straight, but the camera points at a selected subject the entire flight. So select hyperlapse mode and this time choose course lock. Set the settings the way you want, then click the little image with the arrow on the right to set the straight line course for it to fly. If you don't like what you picked, you can click the image picture again and unlock it. Then turn your drone to face the direction you want it to fly and hit course lock again. Now you can turn your drone to point at the subject you want to film and drag a box around it on the screen. Hit go and the drone will fly a set course and point at the subject while it's doing its photos. The final hyperlapse mode is Waypoint. So choose Waypoint and you will see some options at the bottom. Fly to a position and angle that you want the drone to hit in its flight and tap the plus button to add the waypoint. You can make the drone fly these waypoints in order or in reverse order. I like reverse order so that when I set the last waypoint, I can hit go and it will start from the location that it's already at. If you're going to use reverse order, make sure that you put your final drone location in first and your flight path beginning in as your last entry. You can enter up to 5 waypoints, then select whether you want it to fly in order or in reverse order with the icon on the right of the waypoint selections. Select go and wait for it to complete its flight. Okay, that's all of the hyperlapse photo modes. Let's look now at a couple of modes that you can use for shooting video instead of photo. The other modes I'm going to show you could be used with photos set to a timed photo mode, but if you're going to do that, just use the hyperlapse. It's easier and you have more options. So let's tap the controller icon to the left of the screen. Again, make sure your drone is in P mode to see the icon. And in the modes, scroll over to tap fly. On the options at the bottom, choose free. So now you can move the camera around while your drone flies straight. point the drone where you want it to fly and touch the horizon line. You will get a go button and the drone will fly when you hit it. You have a speed control on the screen where you can select a constant speed for the drone to fly. The minimum is 2.2 miles per hour at the time of this video. While the drone flies, you can start recording video and get a slider type of shot. I'll show you how to speed up your video and fake some motion blur in the next section. But now, let's mention a couple of other modes that can be used for video time-lapse. There's a waypoints option that you can use and tap points on the map where you want the drone to go, and a point of interest mode, which will do an orbit around a highlighted subject, just like in the circle mode in Hyperlapse. Both of these can be good for getting some smooth video to use as time lapses, and both have the ability to set the speed of the drone. I could go on for a long time on different modes and settings you could use, but I don't want this video to get too long. So I'm going to move on with a little bit of how to edit the time lapses with the photos or footage that you have. If you have any questions for me, just leave it in the comments below and I'll get back to you. So let's look at editing photos first. I use Premiere Pro, but most editors have the ability to import a group of pictures as a video. Make sure all of your time-lapse images are in a folder by themselves. And in Premiere Pro, go to File, Import, then open the folder with your images. Select the first image and make sure that the box that says Image Sequence is selected. When you choose Open, your photos will be imported into your project as if it were a video, and you can drag it into your timeline and use it. This won't work with raw images. You have to edit those and then save them as JPEGs or something that you can import into your editor as an image sequence. I know a lot of people use Lightroom to do their raw image editing, but I don't do that much with photos, so I just use Adobe Bridge. I'll go over my workflow for the raw editing really quickly that I do in Adobe Bridge. Make sure that all of your images are in a folder together and select the first one and choose Open in Adobe Bridge. In Bridge, make sure that you can see all of the images in your content folder and click one, then hit Ctrl-A on a PC to select all of the raw images in the folder. Now, right-click an image and select Open in Camera Raw. All of the images should be on the left of the screen in your raw editor, and the image selected should be showing on the big window. Select an image to edit and do your editing. After you've finished your edit, you need to hit Done, and it will close that window. Then go back to the Content folder and make sure all the images are selected. If they're not, be sure to hit Ctrl-A again so that they're all selected, then right-click and choose Open in Camera Raw. Now, select another picture on the left, only this time, hit Ctrl-A again. With all of the images selected, click the four little lines above the editing tool on the right and choose Previous Conversion. Now, the adjustments you did to the picture will be applied to all of the raw images. Next, on the bottom left, choose Save Images and set the format to like JPEG or something that can be loaded into your editor as an image sequence. Select a folder where the images will go and choose Save. This will take a little while, and there will be a countdown on the bottom of the screen as it goes through all of the photos. When it's finished, you can open the color-corrected image sequence in your video editor, just like we did before. Now let's look at changing your real-time video footage into a time-lapse and the trick to put some motion blur on it. I'm going to keep this short and to the point since this video is getting a little long. Okay, we had our aerial video clip in Premiere Pro and cut out the section that we wanted to make into a time-lapse. We used the rate stretch tool to speed up the footage to a speed that we liked, and then selected Replace with After Effects Composition. In After Effects, the video opens and is sped up as we had it set in Premiere. If we're not coming from Premiere, we could just open the video in an After Effects composition and then right-click the footage and go to Time and then Time Stretch. Then we just set the speed until the footage plays at the speed that we want. Now, the cars have no blur. They look a little stuttery as they cross the screen. But if we open up the Effects and Presets drop-down and look under Time, we see CC Force Motion Blur and Pixel Motion Blur. Pixel Motion Blur makes some good blur, but it doesn't do so well with the lighter, like white cars for some reason. But CC Force Motion Blur does pretty well on all the cars, so we just used that and played with the settings to get the best look we could, and then returned to Premiere Pro and watched the improvements. This motion blur is certainly not as pleasing as shooting with a low shutter speed and having the blur in camera, but it's an option to use when there's no other good way. I said I would touch on a few tips of using the DJI Phantom 3, so here's a few things about it that will apply to it and really to any drone that you want to use for this. First of all, on the Phantom 3, you can't shoot in RAW at 2 frames per second. I think maybe 10 seconds is about the shortest interval for RAW. But if you switch to JPEGs, then you seem to be able to shoot at 2 seconds. And just like on the Mavic, if you can set your shutter speed to about 1/4 of a second and control the light enough with an ND filter or shoot at night, then you can get that really nice motion blur in camera. Also, set the white balance to something other than automatic so you won't be changing on you while you're doing your time lapse. Check out your drone's automatic modes and see what might be good for a time lapse shot. On the Phantom 3, using the older DJI Go app, the modes point of interest, waypoints, and course lock should give you some pretty good automatic flights, so check those out. But that's gonna have to be it for today's video. It ended up being a little longer than I intended, but that happens. So if there's a section in here that you'd like more information about, just let me know and I'll answer any questions or I'll make another video on the subject. And as always, thanks for watching. And I'm not even gonna ask people to subscribe this week. Even though it would be cool if you did, because we're trying to grow the channel and that really helps us a lot if we have some people subscribed and stuff. So, but it seems like it'd be tacky for some reason this week on this video to ask, so I don't think I will. I mean, if you did it, that's cool, but I'm just gonna quit doing.